A Nelwyn man was plowing his field when, upstream from the river not far away, an old man pushed a newborn baby girl into the flowing water. Suddenly, two vicious dogs appeared and attacked the old man, knocking him down and tearing she apart. The baby girl lay on a small raft made of branches and watergrass, drifting downstream with the gentle current. Soon, the baby was carried by the river to a bank and came to a stop. At that moment, a brother and sister picking wild berries nearby spotted the baby. The boy ran to their father, who was farming, and told him they found a baby by the riverbank. They came to the river, and after looking at the baby, the father said it looked like a daikini baby. The boy also said, "She doesn't really look like us." The father explained to the children, "Daikinis are very tall. They're the giants who live far away." The boy wanted to keep the baby, but the father refused and said they would send her further downstream. Just then, the village chief called out to the father from the fields. The father told the children, "Don't touch the baby," and turned to leave. It turned out the village chief had noticed that Willow somehow had the money to buy seeds for planting, so he came over to collect debts. Willow told the chief, "These seeds were gathered by our family in the forest last autumn." The village chief could only growl, "This land will be mine sooner or later," and walked away. Willow came back to the riverbank and saw his wife holding the baby girl. The baby's adorable smile made the wife fall in love with her instantly. Willow told his wife, "No one in our family is allowed to grow attached to this baby," but his wife ignored him and took the baby home. Back at the house, the wife began washing the baby, but when she wiped the arm, she saw a strange symbol. At that moment, she also realized that this baby might have a significant background, and keeping her might bring trouble to the family. So she suggested to her husband, "We should take the baby to the village council." But Willow didn't want others to know they had found a baby by the river, afraid that the child might bring bad omens. If floods or droughts occurred, people would blame him. Little did he know, the baby truly had an extraordinary origin. A prophet of the Daikini people had foretold that a baby girl born with a magical mark on her arm would one day overthrow Queen Bavmorda's rule. So the evil queen had all pregnant women across the land imprisoned to search for the baby. This particular mother had just given birth when someone noticed the very symbol the queen had described. Begging for mercy, the mother pleaded, and the midwife secretly took the baby away. When the queen found out, she sent vicious dogs and soldiers to capture the midwife. The midwife fled for several days, but was eventually caught by the dogs. In the final moment of desperation, she placed the baby in the river, hoping someone kind would find and protect her. This baby, saved by the midwife at the cost of her life, was now in Willow's family. The wife picked up the crying baby and forced her into Willow's hands. Looking at the baby's innocent smile, Willow couldn't help but smile as well. The next day, Willow carried his magic box on his back and took his two children to the town. Today was the great sorcerer's annual apprentice selection day, and being chosen as his apprentice had always been Willow's dream. Various activities were taking place in the town, and Willow began his magic performance. He took a hollowed-out tree trunk and showed it to the crowd, then slipped it onto his arm. He took a burning stick from his son and passed it through the hole in the trunk over his arm. The crowd began to applaud. Next, Willow was going to perform a magic trick called the disappearing pig. He first covered the pig with a cloth, then lifted it up with both hands and threw it into the air. The pig really disappeared, and the crowd cheered for his performance. A moment later, squeals came from under the table, and then the pig ran out. Everyone burst into laughter when they saw the pig. Soon, High Aldwin arrived to begin the apprentice selection. The village chief saw Willow step onto the stage to take the test and laughed out loud. The first two participants failed to meet High Aldwin's requirements. When it was Willow's turn, he raised his index finger and hesitated, then finally touched High Aldwin's finger with his own. Immediately, High Aldwin announced, "No apprentices will be accepted this year." Willow failed once again. People resumed their performances. Suddenly, a vicious dog charged into the crowd, and everyone began to flee. The dog ran wildly through the festival, as if searching for something. At that moment, the Nelwyn guards arrived at the scene and surrounded the dog. The bravest one, Vonker, killed the dog with a spear. Through Vonker's investigation, it was discovered that the dog was searching for a baby. Willow thought of the baby at his home and rushed back immediately. When he arrived, he saw his wife holding the baby safe and sound, and he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Then he told his wife, "We have to take this baby to the village council." His wife agreed with his suggestion. All the Nelwyns gathered at the village council. Everyone was discussing the vicious dog at the festival, and someone shouted, "Find the sinner and bury him alive in the pit." At that moment, Willow arrived at the council holding the baby, with his whole family. Seeing how agitated the crowd was, He tried to sneak away, but was called out by Aldwin. Aldwin asked him to come forward, and he could only carry the baby and say, "This baby was found by my children at the riverbank." Aldwin glanced at the baby and said, "This is the baby the Daikinis are searching for." As a sorcerer, Aldwin also sensed that the baby was special, so he said, "This child must be sent out of our village, across the great river, and taken to the Daikini crossroads." At that moment, the village chief stepped forward and said, "Whoever found the baby should be the one to deliver her." He nominated Willow, and the crowd agreed, but Aldwin said, "I must consult the bones to see who is most suitable." He poured the bones from his gourd onto the ground, and Willow leaned in. Aldwin whispered to him, "The bones reveal nothing." Then he asked, "Do you feel even a tiny bit of affection for this baby girl?" Willow nodded firmly and said, "Yes, I do." Aldwin stood up and said, "Willow, the safety of the village depends on you." The village chief quickly shouted, "Long live the bones!" Aldwin then asked the crowd, "Who among you has the courage to protect us on this journey?" Willow's brave friend Migosh stepped forward and said, "I will go." The warrior Vonker also stepped forward, but the village chief stood up and objected. "Vonker can't go. He must protect our village," and had him step back. Aldwin looked at the village chief and said, "According to the bones, everything for this expedition is ready, except for one thing: we still need a leader, and from what I see in the bones, that leader is the village chief." Hearing it was him, the chief quickly shouted again, "Vonker will accompany me." Before the departure, Aldwin told Willow, "Have confidence in yourself. You have more potential than anyone else in the village to become a great sorcerer out there. You must believe in yourself." Then he gave Willow some fruit-like objects and told him to keep them safe. They will save you in times of crisis. Whatever they hit will turn to stone. Willow's 2 children told him, "Don't be afraid. We'll grab spears and protect you." Willow hugged his 2 adorable children with affection. Aldwin told everyone, "Nelwins are too small and weak to survive in the outside world. Just hand the child to the first Daikini you meet, and come straight back home." Then Aldwin picked up a stone and threw it into the sky. The stone turned into a small bird. Aldwin said, "Follow the direction in which the bird flies." The 6 of them crossed mountains and rivers, beginning their journey to find a Daikini and deliver the baby. Little did they know, at the same time they set off, the queen also sent out her daughter and soldiers to search for the baby girl. After several days of long travel, Willow and his group arrived at a forest to rest. Suddenly, the sound of barking dogs came from afar. They saw a group of soldiers riding fierce horses and wearing armor, and quickly hid in the bushes. After the soldiers passed, they continued on their journey. After days of hard travel, the Nelwins finally saw a crossroads up ahead. They arrived at the crossroads, but the place felt eerie, with bones scattered all over the ground. The baby girl seemed to see something frightening and looked up in terror. Suddenly, a terrifying scream made everyone grab their weapons. Another eerie scream followed, scaring Willow into stepping backward. Suddenly, a pair of large hands grabbed him. Inside a cage appeared a man, who asked Willow to bring him some water, or else he would kill him. The village chief looked and said, "This seems to be a Daikini. We can hand the baby to him." But Willow felt uneasy about giving the baby to a man who appeared mysteriously in a cage. Vonker said, "We have to give the baby to someone, don't we?" The man in the cage said, "I'm the one you're looking for. Just let me out, and I can take good care of the baby." The village chief insisted on handing the baby to the man, but Willow opposed. Seeing he couldn't persuade Willow, the chief decided to take a few people and return to the village. But Willow's good friend Migosh stayed behind. The man in the cage saw the chief about to leave and quickly shouted for them to let him down. At this point, the man was no longer useful to the chief, so he simply ignored him and walked away. Willow and Migosh, who stayed behind, could only wait there for a Daikini to appear so they could entrust the baby to them. In the morning, the sound of galloping hooves startled the 2 awake. The man in the cage then started introducing himself again, saying his name was Madmartigan, but Willow remained very wary of him and didn't want to engage. Suddenly, the sound of a horse's neigh rang out, and Willow quickly stood in the middle of the road, trying to stop the passerby, but the rider didn't stop. Madmartigan, in the cage, told Willow, "Looks like there's a war coming. None of them will help you. I'm a great swordsman. I can help you. Just please, give me a sip of water. I'm dying of thirst." As he spoke, he even began to cry. Kind-hearted Willow handed him the cup of water. The next second, a large group of soldiers appeared in the distance. They quickly picked up the baby and stood to the side of the road, calling out in hopes someone would take the baby girl. But the commander of the soldiers said, "We're heading to war. No one can take care of her. Better to find a woman to care for the baby." Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice calling out to him. Turning his head, he saw it was Bavmorda, who had once again ended up in a cage. Bavmorda asked for help getting out, but the commander didn't want to get involved and led his men away. At this point, Willow and his group had little food left. Looking at the baby in his arms, he began to miss his own children. Bavmorda promised Willow again, "I'll treat the baby like my own." After some thought, Migosh opened the cage and let him out. Bavmorda, thrilled to be free, lifted Migosh up in joy. He walked over to the baby, picked her up, and told Willow, "I'll take good care of her." The baby seemed a little unhappy. After giving Bavmorda a few warnings, Willow decided he and Migosh would return home. On the way back, still uneasy, Willow asked his friend, was it really right to hand over the baby? Suddenly, the sound of a baby's cry came from the sky. They looked up and saw a giant bird carrying the baby girl, with a tiny person riding on its back shouting, "I stole a baby." Willow saw it was the baby he had just given to that man, and ran after them. The next second, 2 small arrows shot into the tree beside him. Turning around, he saw many tiny people standing in the trees, shooting arrows at them. Willow and Migosh tried to run, but they still fell into a trap. When they woke up, they found themselves tied up. These tiny people were pulling them with ropes, dragging them somewhere unknown. Suddenly, a voice called out from the sky.
"Frangine, release the Nelwins and stop pestering them."
A fairy descended and told Willow, "This baby is named Elora Danon. She was born with a destiny to end Queen Bavmorda's tyranny. That's why Elora Danon must survive. If she fails to overthrow the evil queen's rule, the queen will take control of all life, including your children. Now we need a warrior to escort Elora Danon to the kingdom of Tirasleen, where a wise king and queen will raise her. Elora Danon has chosen you, Willow, to be her protector. All you need to do is bring my wand and the baby to the sorceress Raziel. He will guide you and Elora Danon to Tirasleen." The fairy asked Willow to consider if he would accept this mission. After thinking it over all night, for the sake of his wife and children, Willow decided to accept. After saying goodbye to his friend Migosh, he set off again, carrying the baby and accompanied by 2 tiny people. Led by the tiny ones, Willow headed toward Raziel's location. From them, he learned that Raziel had been exiled to a small island, and they'd have to cross several mountains to get there, no matter how difficult it was. For the sake of his people, Willow was determined to deliver the baby to Raziel. As they journeyed, bad weather hit and rain began to fall. Soaked to the skin, Willow sought shelter at a nearby tavern. Unexpectedly, he ran into Bavmorda there, but the soldiers searching for the baby also arrived at the tavern. They were checking every child's arm to see if it was the one they were looking for. When they checked Bavmorda, the princess discovered that he was actually a man disguised as a woman. Exposed, Bavmorda escaped by sliding down a rope from the upper floor. He jumped into a wagon outside and fled, with the soldiers chasing right behind. In the end, with Willow and Bavmorda working together, they managed to drive off the pursuing soldiers. Willow now understood that without outside help, it would be nearly impossible for him and the 2 tiny people to deliver the baby to Raziel. So he intentionally praised Bavmorda, saying things like he's brave and a really good man. Bavmorda, flattered by the compliments, agreed to head south with them. That night, unable to sleep, Willow picked up Cherlindria's wand and began practicing magic. Unexpectedly, he accidentally transformed himself onto a tree branch. After much effort in climbing mountain after mountain, they finally reached the shore of the island where Raziel lived. Seeing the island just ahead, Bavmorda walked up to the baby and said, "Goodbye, Styx. If you really are a princess, take care of him." At that moment, Willow also knew that this wild and unruly swordsman was about to leave again, and he could only wish him a safe journey in his heart. They rowed a small boat and arrived at the island. They shouted for a long time but got no response. Just as Willow was feeling disappointed, a mouse suddenly ran out. The mouse asked him, "Who is it? Are you here to see someone?" Willow told the mouse he was looking for the great sorcerer, Raziel. The mouse replied, "I am Raziel." Willow didn't quite believe it. The mouse explained that she had been transformed into this form by Bavmorda's spell. Hearing this, Willow took out the wand Cherlindria gave him for Raziel. The moment Raziel saw the wand, she realized the prophecy had come true and told Willow to take her to see baby Elora Danon. After seeing the baby, Raziel praised, "She's truly a beautiful child." Then she asked Willow to use the wand to turn her back to her original form, but Willow had only learned tricks, not real magic. Suddenly, a group of soldiers arrived on the island. They captured Bavmorda, who had just landed. then took the baby and everyone else off the island. After a few days of travel, the princess reunited with Kale and decided to rest here for the night before returning to the castle tomorrow. While being held captive, Willow saw Raziel again and took out the wand, hoping to restore her form, but his spell didn't return her to normal. Instead, she turned into a crow. At that moment, the two tiny people inserted their spears into the lock hole, and Madmartigan easily unlocked the cage. Together, they searched the camp for the baby. In one of the tents, they found her. Madmartigan volunteered to go in and rescue her, but he accidentally woke the sleeping princess. Now a true swordsman, Madmartigan picked up a sword and easily defeated two soldiers. Then he and Willow rode a sled down the mountain. The baby laughed happily in Willow's arms. After a thrilling descent, they reached the base of the mountain. Seeing the baby safe, Willow was relieved. Just as they stepped out the door, a snowball came rolling toward them, and they quickly ducked inside and shut the door. The snowball crashed into the door. At that moment, Kale and his soldiers had already caught up. They had no choice but to hide in the basement with everyone else. In the basement, Madmartigan ran into Eric and grabbed him, asking, "Why didn't you rescue me from the cage back then?" Eric told him, "If I had, you might have died on the battlefield. We were slaughtered. Almost the entire army wiped out." As they spoke, the princess searched the room above the basement. Soon, she found the entrance and came down, but Madmartigan overpowered her. They then used the princess as a hostage to escape. Guided by the crow, they crossed many mountains and finally arrived at Tirasleen. Inside the castle, they found it completely empty. It turned out Bavmorda had used magic to imprison all the soldiers there. While exploring, Madmartigan discovered the castle's armory. He began to fight Kale's soldiers using the weapons. He set up traps around the castle to fight back. The princess stood below watching the brave Madmartigan and began to fall in love with him. Just as he was about to give out, Eric arrived with reinforcements. Seeing they were outnumbered, Kale fled the castle with the remaining soldiers and the baby. Afterward, Willow and the soldiers arrived at the queen's castle. As they discussed how to break in, the queen appeared on the castle wall. Seeing the scattered soldiers below, she laughed and didn't take them seriously. The queen casually shouted, "You are all pigs." Madmartigan suddenly felt pain all over. Then he grew two fangs from his mouth, and his hands began to change shape. Soon, all the soldiers were turned into pigs by the queen. Seeing this, Willow was discouraged. Raziel told him, "Don't lose hope. Just turn me back to my original form, and we can solve everything." Willow began casting spells on the sheep to restore Raziel. She changed into an ostrich, then into a turtle, but Willow didn't give up, continuing to use the wand. Just as he was about to collapse, he finally succeeded. Raziel returned to human form. Raziel then used the wand to turn all the pig-transformed soldiers back into humans. The next day, only Willow and Raziel stood beneath the castle. They deliberately provoked the soldiers above with taunts. Eventually, the soldiers opened the castle gates and charged out to kill them. Just as the soldiers rushed out, Willow struck a drum. Inside the castle, the queen was performing dark magic on the baby. Raziel's appearance interrupted her spell and told Bavmorda, "I now have Cherlindria's wand. My magic is stronger." Bavmorda suddenly hurled a ball of fire at Raziel, engulfing her in flames, but Raziel raised her wand, and the magic it released instantly froze Bavmorda. They thought she was trapped, but she unleashed a powerful spell, knocking Raziel back. A giant stone fell toward her. At the critical moment, the wand flew back into Raziel's hand. As the two battled with magic, Willow snuck in to try and take the baby, but Bavmorda spotted him and shut the door. In desperation, Willow threw one of the enchanted fruits at her. Bavmorda easily deflected Willow's magic. Then she told him, "Put the baby on the altar and I might spare your life." But Willow refused and told her, "I'm a powerful sorcerer too." He began chanting a spell, and suddenly, the baby vanished. Bavmorda screamed in rage and accidentally knocked over the blood on the altar. The next second, lightning struck from the sky and hit her. The spilled blood turned into mist, and with a scream of agony, Bavmorda vanished. Willow had successfully completed the mission of protecting the baby. Raziel gave him a book of magic. The princess and Madmartigan would raise the baby until she became queen. Back in the village, the Nelwyns surrounded Willow. He took an apple from his pocket and threw it into the sky. The apple instantly turned into a small bird. I'm a movie enthusiast. Thanks for watching. See you next time.